All right, guys. So the thing about career SJW academics is that in order for them to keep their jobs, none of the answers to their questions regarding the disparities between educational outcomes among race can be as simple as something like poverty or the cultures of said race and the habits that the parents instill in children at home that lead to their performance in school. That can't be the answer. That cannot be the answer. Because if that is the answer, then they're out of a job. There is a whole industry built off of trying to figure out how the government can make up for bad behavior, make up for bad parenting, make up for what students are lacking in the home. Okay? There's a whole industry based off of it. Academics are employed across the nation for the sole purpose of figuring out how to make all the races equal in terms of performance, because there can't be any variation. Okay? And I believe that this is why we have things like the school district who has decided that Asians aren't students of color. But before we get into that, my name is Greg Foreman, and you're watching A Black Conservative Perspective. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share A Black Conservative Perspective, aka a leftist worst nightmare. You can also follow me on Twitter at GForemanBCP. Let's get them. All right, guys. So there's an article from Reason.com. School district decides Asians aren't students of color. One school district in Washington state has evidently decided that Asians no longer qualify as persons of color. In their latest equity report, administrators at North Thurston Public Schools, which oversees some 16,000 students, lumped Asians in with whites and measured their academic achievements against students of color, a category that includes Black, Latinx. There go that Latinx word again. I wonder how Hispanics really feel about that. But Native American, Pacific Islander, and multiracial students who have experienced persistent opportunity gaps. Most indicators in the report show that the achievement gap between white/Asian students and students of color is fairly narrow and improving over time. It would probably be even narrower if Asian students were categorized as students of color. In fact, some indicators might have shown some white students lagging behind the catch-all minority group. Perhaps Asians were included with whites in order to avoid such an outcome. The superintendent did not respond to a request for comment. Now, that's kind of exactly what I was saying at the beginning of my commentary, is that the incentive is to find some type of disparity, right? If you were to lump Asians into the students of color, then the Asians would drag up the other students of color and minorities to the point where they may be outperforming whites. So now the narrative of people of color being less than white or not being able to perform as well as white, that no longer exists anymore. That narrative will not exist. We can't have minorities that outperform whites. We can't have that. So guess what we got to do? We got to make Asians white. We can take the most successful minority group and make them white. That way, if we make them white, then there's no way that the other minorities can catch up. And if the other minorities can't catch up, then we can keep our jobs, because there's more for us to study. There's more experiments for us to do. There's more explanations that we have to have, and more government programs that we can use that benefit us, by the way, that keep us employed, that can help solve this problem. Now, the rest of this article I think is more opinion-based, but I think it's an interesting opinion. What the equity report really highlights is the absurdities that result from over-reliance on semi-arbitrary race-based categories. The report also measured students of poverty, those who qualified for free or reduced lunch costs, against non-poverty students, and unsurprisingly found a much more significant achievement gap. Students of poverty performed 28% worse on math tests, for instance. That socioeconomic category captures something real and meaningful in a way that gerrymandered race category doesn't. I 100% agree with that. Outside of public school bureaucracies, these kind of race-based classifications seem less popular than ever. In the 2020 election, California voters decisively rejected Proposition 16, which would allow public employees to consider race as a factor in university admissions, employment, contracting, and other decisions. Race-based admissions have been forbidden in the state since 1996, when voters outlawed them via ballot initiative by a margin of 54% to 45%. Proposition 16, which would have reversed this, lost by even larger margin despite receiving enthusiastic endorsements from top Democrats in the state. Now, no surprise there, guys. I'm going to touch on the poverty thing in a minute, but I want to say about the affirmative action in California. It's funny to me how the most liberal state in this country does not want affirmative action, but they want to push affirmative action on everywhere else in the country. Again, do as I say, not as what I do mentality coming from the left. Once again. And they don't want it because they know that it's not fair. They don't even like it, right? How can you push something on somebody else that you don't like? You don't even believe in it. You don't even do it. For all that, racial justice talk, California doesn't even have affirmative action. Again, how hypocritical is that? They love lecturing other parts of the country about what we should be doing to help race relations. What y'all need to be doing to pull up everybody else. To pull up black people, to pull up Hispanic people, to pull up all these other people. But yet, they're not doing it. And the result is that they're happy with it, apparently. They like having UCLA be mostly Asian. Because that's what happens when there's no affirmative action, right? Like, the people that are most prepared, right? The culture that is most educated and that focuses on education and values education the most, they're going to get admitted into good schools. Again, look up UCLA. Asians have basically taken over that school. And again, there's no reason why if, Hispanic or black people didn't have the same performance and didn't have the same education standards that culturally is ingrained in Asians, that we couldn't do the same thing. Asians have demonstrated time and time again that you can come to America, you can take over a school if you want, you can hire your own schools, you can hire your own communities, have your own businesses, you can have experts at the top levels of academia. I mean, even now, they even got a politician. They got Andrew Yang, right? Like, who I like, right? They even got Andrew Yang. They Asians are the least politically involved, but now they even get involved in politics. It was like, let's get our money straight. Let's get our education straight. And then we're going to get involved in politics. That's what they're doing. The same thing that I feel like a lot of other people should be doing. Right? It's not that there's lack of opportunity. It's about culture. And the Asians have demonstrated a roadmap for what a successful culture can look like here in a white-dominated society that the liberals say that it is. Again, when liberals like to talk about this stuff, the Asians are a good counter-argument to all of that. Now, let's take a look into the statistics, guys, because all this really comes down to is poverty, guys. Crime comes down to poverty. Education, attainment comes down to poverty. Wealth comes down to poverty. Everything comes down to poverty, guys. It really does. If you can alleviate poverty, you can solve 90% of problems. But how do you eliminate poverty? Is that something the government needs to do, or is that something that is cultural? Right? That's the question. Now, let's take a look at the statistics here. Let's look at the poverty rate in the United States by ethnic group. Blacks are 18.8%. Hispanics are 15.7%. All races are 10.5%. Asians alone are 7.3%. And whites are 7.3%. So the poverty rate for Asians and whites are about the same, which, again, explains why their achievement is much more in line outside of these other groups. Simple explanation here. Now, let's look at the poverty rate for Asian married couples in the United States. It is 4.5%. 4.5%, guys. Now, let's look at the poverty rate for black married couples. It is 6.4%. There's almost no disparity. Oh my God, poverty magically goes away when there's a two-income household. Oh my God. Wow. Such a big development. A mom and a dad can help with poverty? You don't need the government for that? My God, you have to be insane to come to a conclusion like that. That when you look at married couples between Asians and blacks, oh my God, all of a sudden the poverty rate is not necessarily as big anymore. Right? But then here's the difference between achievement that you're seeing. Look at this chart, guys. The single parent families by race and ethnicity from 2014 to 2018, Asians are only 20%. Blacks are 66%. Latinos are 41%. Whites are 33%. So the minority group that's most successful in this country has the lowest rate of single parent families out of all the ethnicities in the country. Again, this is not a coincidence. Now, people say, correlation doesn't equal causation. And I understand that, but I think there's some strong correlations here. Now, guys, listen to this. Now, this is from the Marriage and Religion Research Institute. It is a research synthesis on marriage, family structure, and children's educational attainment. Now, obviously, you can tell what my bias is, but all of these facts are properly cited for their corresponding studies, right? Listen to this. Raw achievement, test scores. Elementary school children from intact biological families earn higher reading and math scores than children in cohabiting and divorced, single, and always single parent families. Adolescents from non-intact families have lower scores than their counterparts in intact families on math, science, history, and reading scores. Adolescents living in intact married families or married step families with stepfathers perform similarly on the Peabody vocabulary test, but adolescents living in single mother families or in cohabiting step families with their biological mother did worse than those in intact families. Grades. High school students who live in intact married families have a higher average combined GPA in English and math, 2.9, than those in married step families, divorced families, or intact cohabiting families, 2.6, and those in always single parent families or cohabiting step families, 2.5. Attending college. Over 57% of children who live in intact biological families enter college, compared to 32.5% of children in in-step families, 47.5% of children in single parent families, and 31.8% of children who live in families without either parent present. College graduation. Students from disrupted families are less likely to complete a 4-year college than their peers from intact biological families. Overall, adolescents from single parent families and cohabiting families are more likely to have low achievement scores, lower expectations for college, lower grades, and higher dropout rates than children from intact biological families, after controlling for other family socioeconomic factors. Those 7 facts right there disprove the whole Black Lives Matter narrative that you don't need a nuclear family and that you can create these villages of women and other family members that can take care of kids and they can achieve and do just as much as everybody else. No. Biological intact families. Biological intact families are superior. They are king. Okay? Now, there's some other bullet points here on school behavior, backed up by citations and parental impact on education. But I want to go, and religion as well. But I want to go down to family income to make the video short here. Enrichment. Intact married families are stronger economically. Cognitive development. Infants and toddlers from higher income families are more likely to master age-appropriate cognitive and language skills than those from lower income families. Neighborhood. Intact biological families tend to have larger incomes and affects the neighborhood in which their families can afford to live, and thereby the quality and resources of the schools their children will attend. College support. Intact biological families save earlier and more for and expect to spend more to support their children's first year in college. Summary. Marriage is a major contributor to educational success and therefore to the economy as well. The more united parents are, the better their children do. And there is over 31 citations from different studies on this that all back up these facts. Okay, so I'm going to attach that in the comment section so you guys can use to argue with liberals when you talk about why certain people achieve and certain people don't. It all comes down to marriage. I mean, it really does. This stuff is not hard, man. This stuff is not hard. And the people that got it figured out don't want you to have it figured out, because that's how they stay ahead of the game. They keep you dependent on the government when all you got to do is depend on yourself. Independence is the key. Marriage is the key to independence. And see, this is why I have a big problem with the liberal narrative. They claim to be the party of facts and statistics, but the facts and statistics support the conservative argument. You don't need the government to put two parents in the household and your poverty problem is solved. Once the poverty problem is solved, all of a sudden, achievement for students go up. When you get a two-parent household, now all of a sudden, parents have time to read to their kids. Parents have time to teach their kids math, science. I mean, when I was growing up, you know, my parents were reading me all the time. I was proud of going in the first grade knowing how to multiply, right? I used to go to my first grade teacher and be like, look, I know how to do 2 times 2 or 8 times 2 or 10 times 4. I was proud of being ahead in math even from an early age. That was something that was ingrained in me because my parents went out of their way to do that. They went out of their way to make sure that I just wasn't reliant on the public education system to educate me. They made sure I was way over prepared than what I needed to be so that my achievement was good. And again, I get it. Single parent households, parents don't necessarily have time to do that. They got to work 2 jobs. They got bills. They got all this other stuff going on. But again, this is why culturally there needs to be emphasis on marriage. The single baby mama culture that goes on in the black community has to go. We have to stop glorifying people having kids out of wedlock. We have to stop glorifying the hood mentality. I'm so serious about that. And again, this is not just a black thing. It's a white thing. You know, white people in poverty, they don't perform as well either. You know, Hispanics in poverty don't perform as well either. Poverty is the underlying issue. And at the end of the day, you know, a lot of people want the government to solve their poverty issue, but if that parent still has to work, or if that parent doesn't have the mentality to instill education in their kids and to try to teach them how to read at a young age, teach them math at a young age, give them skills at a young age to be ahead in school, it's not going to change anything. That's why you need 2 parents. Because time and dedication to the child at a very young age, basically out of the womb, is the determining factor. Asians have figured that out. They figured it out. It's not hard. You know, it ain't difficult. Get married. That's your poverty solution. So again, it just continues to show up everywhere, and this is what conservatives have been talking about. But anyways, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a black conservative perspective. Peace.